Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for March's Layer 7 office hours. This promises to be a really good session. We have Christian joining us, who's going to be talking about a new technology we introduced about a month ago called the Layer 7 operator. I'm going to let him dig into that. I won't take away anything from the coolness of what he's going to be talking about. I do want to say, for those of you who have colleagues who couldn't make it this morning, this will be available as a recording, a replay later on today in the Layer 7 communities. And with that, I'll turn it over to Christian.
Thanks a lot, Bill. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, we're going to talk about the Layer 7 operators, which was released about a month ago, and which is a great asset to our Layer 7 API management platform. I just skip over the disclaimer, which you have certainly seen many times. And I start with a couple of slides to introduce what operators are before we jump in right into the topic with some hands-on demos. Um, Layer 7 operator is a capability that is the pillar to our Cloud 2.0 architecture, as you can see here. So you have here on the right-hand side a set of container gateways running into a Kubernetes environment. And basically what the operator does is going to pull configuration, policies, class-wide properties, everything that you need to basically configure and have your gateway running. So the operator will basically have an active eye on this cluster to ensure that the current state matches the desired state. And if it's not the case, it will update automatically the gateways, the cluster. So that's shown here in this slide. Basically, the beauty of Kubernetes is that it's an orchestrator that basically, constantly monitors your platform, watches the current state, and make sure that the current state does match the target state which you have defined into definition files. So it basically goes into circle between observation, analyzing, and then acting to match and to do the required changes. And I think that's the beauty of the operator that we introduced, which basically is a Kubernetes operator. It's built on top of or uses the framework for being a Kubernetes operator. And it manages a series of resources that are key. So these are the custom resources that the Layer 7 operator will manage and help you basically monitor and manage your platform in a very automated way, so that you don't have to do hands-on work to deploy your APIs, maintain the configuration. The operator does it all automatically for you, which is the beauty and the significant asset that we have brought into our platform. So it's built using the operator SDK that covers all aspects of deploying, as it says here, deploying, maintaining, and upgrading API gateways in Kubernetes. For that, it does manage, at this stage, two custom resources. The one is the gateway. So it's used to deploy and manage and upgrade the gateways and make sure that your gateways is always in a state that is matching your target state, which you have defined. And it also manages the repository. So we have defined we have a custom resource that basically is a repository. We have different types of repositories. And it basically will pull, as shown here, it will monitor those repository and pull the configuration that is needed and updates automatically the container gateways. So all that is automated, which is really great for maintaining your Layer 7 container gateways and your cluster. So we have we have on our community Git, we released comprehensive documentation and assets, and this is what we will go through to help you getting started with the Layer 7 operator. So let me jump on to these assets. So this is the the wiki page, documented documentation about the operators. Okay, so it's there has been a great effort put by our team to document significantly how to deploy and how to use the operators with a lot of samples. So we're going to go into the get started one. And in this documentation, you will see, the custom resources, the gateway, the repository, and you also have pointers to other custom resources that we're going to add with the portal, to come pretty soon. So if you look here into the code, you have a lot of assets, and we will use these assets to get started. Here you have the getting started page. So what I'm going to do is basically to run these commands and show you how you can deploy an operator and use the operator to deploy and maintain a gateway that is running in Kubernetes. So I'm not going to go into each aspects of the documentation, but some key aspects. One of the very important aspects of the operator is that it has feature parity with Helm charts. So what does that mean is, our customers used to deploy the gateway with Helm charts. The Helm charts are very much, it's a package manager, and I would say it's pretty static. You define what your gateway is, and you deploy your gateway, and then you have a gateway running. But if you modify policies, if you modify cluster-wide properties, you have to manually find a way to apply those policies and those new configurations to the gateway. And this is a manual task, which is very prone to error. With the operator, this is all automated. But the operator, as I said in the beginning, provides you with the ability to deploy the gateway. So when you deploy the gateway with Helm charts, you had a lot of configuration that you could do. At this stage with operator, we provide you with the same configuration capabilities. So you can deploy your gateway with operators and have exactly the same capabilities that you had with Helm charts. The operator is deployed with a Helm chart. And basically, the operator is also available on the operator hub. So if you click here, you'll see the operator hub with the operator. One of the key components that the operator is using for upgrading the gateways is the Graphman tool. There has been a couple of sessions on Graphman, so I'm not going to go into details, but you need to know that Graphman is used by the operator to apply the configurations and maintain the gateways that are running. In terms of repositories, we support static and dynamic repositories. So I will go into that in more details. And what is also important to know is that operators enable you to deploy what we call ephemeral gateway, which are basically gateway that are database-less or do not use an external MySQL database, as well as deploying gateways that use an external MySQL database. So that comes, as I said, with the feature parity in terms of configuration. I will go more into details between the difference on static and dynamic configuration. In terms of repository, we can manage both Git repository or artifact repository, so more file-based repository. And we also have the capability to integrate with external secret management. As you may have seen here on the introduction architecture, you can integrate with secret management tools that are provided natively by the Kubernetes platform. So here are a couple of prerequisites. I'm not going to go into details, but I'm just jumping here for the deployment of this Layer7 operator. And what you need to do is to have, a cert manager. So I basically, I will go into the cluster deployment. So which is the one that is recommended for the deployment of the operator. And basically the operator here will manage the entire cluster and not just the containers that you may have in a namespace. So I'm going to go for the cluster deployment here. For the sake of conveniency, I basically took all the commands that you have in this page and I put them into a single file that is here. What I also did is I cloned this code repository that you see here, and I cloned it, and I have visibility of this repository into my Visual Studio that is here. So you see pretty much the same that you have here. I made a couple of additions, but the example is what we're going to use today with the sample gateways that we're going to deploy in the sample configuration, and this is basically the same that you have here. So let me, here I have a Kubernetes cluster running. If I have an alias which is K for kubectl. So if I type K, get pods, I will get namespace to start with, namespaces. You see I have the default namespace, and then I have a couple of system namespace, but I have actually nothing deployed at this stage. So let me deploy the cert manager as required in the documentation, and just type this. And you see custom resource are being deployed, webhooks, and you have here. Okay, so it may be that I'm missing admin. Let me retype this. Okay, reapply it. Here we go. And then I can check that I have all my cert managers in place. They are not yet there. There is one not deployed yet, and now all is there. Okay, so I have the required, the desired state matches, the current state matches the desired state for this first section. I then go and deploy the operators. So if I go back to the wiki, you will see getting started here. I then deploy. So I have my cert managers, and I deploy the Layer7 operator, and I apply basically a Helm chart that you can see here. So I'm just going to apply this command here. And the operator is being deployed. So if I do get pods, sorry, if I get here the logs of the operator, you see here my operator is being deployed. Okay, and I will monitor as I move forward. I will monitor the logs of the operator, which is to be watched, because this is basically the component that is in charge of administering your cluster of gateways. So we'll have a close eye on these logs of the operator. Okay, now if I go into the example page, we have a couple of gateways that we basically are provided in documentation as examples for the deployments. There is the basic example here, but I made it even more basic by having a super basic gateway. And this gateway is basically going to pull the configuration from three repositories. Okay, I have two dynamic repositories and I have one static repository. In terms of the repository, so let me explain the custom resource, the repository custom resource. So let me just quickly look here into creating a repository. So here we have by default, we provide free repositories. I added mine, but let me go to the wiki. So these are my repositories. So I'm just looking for the definition of the repository, sorry for that, couple of tabs open. Here we go, sorry for that. Yeah, the repository custom resource. So as I said, we have the gateway custom resource, okay, with all the configuration that is documented here. Okay, so all the aspects of the gateway that you can configure, and we have the same for repositories. So in the repository, we basically, the repository is defined through a YAML file, okay, and you define here your repository. So you basically map your repository in case it's a Git repository with your Git endpoint. Okay, so and you can also define the authentication credentials for the repository. So we have several repository example. Here we have a file repository where basically the endpoint is a URL from where you will fetch an entire configuration. And we have in this documentation that you can see here, we have different ways of authenticating for the repository. Okay, so what I have here in my configuration, we have here a couple of repositories. So these are the repositories that are coming together with the configuration. Here. The framework repository, the subscription and the API repository, which are basically defined in this file. The framework repository does match this Git folder. The subscription repository does match this Git folder, and my API repository does match this Git folder. So if I look at the API repository, for example, here, you will see that I have APIs defined. These APIs are defined in Grafman bundle files. Okay, so they do respect the exploded Grafman format that you have. And if you are a bit familiar, if you look into Grafman, you will see that when you explode a gateway configuration that you get from Grafman, you will have APIs put into this tree format. We'll also look into that in more details afterwards. I personally also defined two other repositories on my Git. One is a static repository and the other one is a dynamic repository. So the difference between the static and the dynamic repository is that a static repository, if you make a change to the repository, the operator will see that something has changed in your static repository and it will restart the container gateway. If you make a change to a dynamic repository, on the other hand, the gateway will not be restarted and it will be upgraded automatically. So we support both the ability to upgrade and maintain a gateway either through a dynamic upgrade without a container restart or with a restart of the gateway. So we have this capability and we do support both capabilities. So just a note on the Grafman exploded bundle. If you get a configuration from your gateway, you will have a bundle file, and when you explode this bundle, you have all your configuration that is archived or shown here into specific directories. So for your connectors, for your NCAS, if you have NCAS, and then you have your policies that are put in this tree folder, and you will have subfolder for each of your folders. So here I basically have my development gateway, and I exported it, and I have a lot of all my configuration in this gateway. So this is just a refresher on what is the Grafman tree structure when you do an explode of your gateway. So to summarize, what I have here is in my for my demo, I basically have I'm going to deploy a basic gateway, okay? And my gateway is going to get the configuration from 3 repositories. One dynamic repository, which is where I have my APIs. Another dynamic repository, which is my own one, which I created, and a static repository, which is also my own one. If I look into these repositories, here, my static repository, I have a JDBC connection configured. Okay. If I go back in my dynamic repository, it's pretty much empty, and at this stage I don't have anything in my repository. So let me go back to my comments, and I'm now going to basically create my repositories. So as I showed you here, I'm going to create my API repository by applying this YAML file, and then I create the 2 other repository. Okay, so you see the operator picked up the repository, and you see here the commit number that does match the commit number of my repository. So if I basically do the same for the dynamic repository, again, it's being picked up by the operator, and I do the same for my static repository, which is also picked up. So, here now I would say the connection is being made between the repository, my Git repositories, and my operator. And my operator now is actively monitoring those repositories and checking the changes that may occur, and then we'll apply the changes. So if I look at my static repository and the commit number, it's 21C here. If I just go quickly on my static repository, here I see the commit number, which is here, 21CBA9A. Okay, so it's, there is now a mapping, as I said, between the repository and, a link between the repository and the operator watching it. Okay, if I now check the repository, get repositories, repositories. You see here that I have my 3 repositories that are being created. I can now create my gateway. So as I showed you before, my gateway, is of kind gateway. So this is the custom resource that we define. Again, with all the configuration that can be, that is documented here. So you can, if you want to add init containers, the change that you want to make, etc., etc. So this is basically like, the Helm charts. It's very similar to Helm charts and provides you with the ability to configure the gateway with a lot of details as documented here. So let me now create my gateway. I first need, of course, to create a secret with the license. So I put my license into this folder. And this is something that you will have to do if you do a clone of the Layer7 operator from Git. You will have to put your license here into resources secrets. And then you have a folder where you have the license that you need to add. Once this is done, I can now apply my gateway. So you see now the operator is watching it. So it's being started. I have an alias, which is a watch command, watch kubectl get pod. So if I type W, you see that my pod is initializing and it's going to be started. So I need to wait a bit. Any question that you may have in between at this stage?
Hello, I've got a question about static and dynamic.
Yes.
If a pod restarts, if a pod stops and then starts again, or it scales up, and I'm using static, Does that pick up the latest changes when the pod restarts, or does it have to be something else that restarts?
No, it picks the latest changes in your static Git repository.
So if I scaled up, I could have the ones that were older having older policy than the ones that have just I've just created through scaling up. That's what's worrying me.
You shouldn't, Phil. Again, the operator is monitoring your repositories for changes, and it applies those changes immediately when it sees them. So older gateways will get changes applied to them right away. Newer gateways will get whatever's current when they start up. So, you know, if you scaled, your new gateways that are coming up because of scaling would just get the same configuration that your current gateways have. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. That's exactly what I would hope it would do.
Yep. Good question.
So you see here that my gateway now is running. So if I do get service, okay, I can reach it on this this IP. Now if I do a curl -kv https the IP 8443/API3, I basically have my gateway up and running and sending me a message. Okay, I could also, you know, connect with the policy manager into my gateway. Using this IP address. Okay, and you see here that I have my cluster-wide properties. You know, there is nothing, no cluster-wide properties being added. Sorry, I jumped a bit ahead in my demo, but you see here that my APIs are all there, all set. And in my static repository, that was here, if you remember, I had a JDBC connection. So if I go to my static, I had a JDBC connection. Tests. Okay, I can click here. Okay. And if I go to my gateway, I basically look for the JDBC connection, and I'll see my connection that is being there. So the idea between, you know, static and you know, dynamic folder is you would typically put in your static folders, you know, things that are not changing often, like your configuration, your environment, a JDBC connection, Kafka connection, GMS connection, whatever is needed as an environment to have your gateway running. And, you know, you would assume that if you change your environment, you would, you know, rather, you know, restart the gateway to have a fresh, you know, properly configured gateway. Dynamic is more for when you do make quick changes to cluster-wide properties or APIs and policies, etc. So let me now show you the beauty of operators. Okay, so I'm going to add here, you know, I'm going to add a cluster property. So I have, this is local and this is my my Git folder. Okay, so in cluster properties, I'm going to copy this one here, x hello. Okay, I'm going to paste it here. Okay, and I'm also going to paste, you know, as you see here in my tree configuration, you know, and the idea here is for dynamic repository to basically match the exploded Grafman directory configuration. Okay, so I basically copy this, put that in my tree. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to commit to push these changes. You see here my two changes that are being made. I'm going to update that, update gateway. I commit and I push this to my folder. Okay, and you see here, if I do W here, Okay, there hasn't been any restarts. Okay, but a new commit has been picked here. Okay, so yeah, here I have a new commit 9BA50. Okay, and if I go to my folder, if I do that's the static one. If I do here my repository, okay, if I look at the dynamic folder, I have 9BA50. Okay, and now if I basically do a curl to my service code/hello, I have hello office hours message. And if I just refresh my policy manager, I will see that my policy was added. Okay. And I see also that my new cluster property here was added. Okay, XLO. And my policy is actually referring this cluster property that you see here. If I explode here, if I have this cluster property, I just respond no gateway hello. Okay, so automatically, if I may say, the operator basically pulled the configuration from your Git folder, applied it to your gateways without that you had anything to do. You just basically, in this pipeline, you basically moved a new policy, and it basically created that policy automatically into the gateway. And I could go on and on if I want to, here, for example, I could add more. So in my gateway explode, for example, I could pick up other configurations or secrets. And now I could basically take an entire folder. For example, I could copy this and I could add it to my tree here, paste it. Okay, I have a new folder with an ANCAS here and an audit a policy that is using this ANCAS. Okay, I commit it. You see here that there's a change, so I put update number 2. Okay, I commit to main, I push. Okay, you see the operator picks up the commit. Okay.
Christian, can you hear me? I have a question regarding the client you just used.
Yep.
For push, is that just like it's GitHub desktop, but you could do the same through VS Code, right? For as far as push.
Yeah, you could do the same using this. Is just basically Git commands, but I find it easier to use in a demo than just typing the commands. So I'm just using the Git desktop to do that.
Git desktop. Thank you.
No worries. And if I look here at my extensions, I see that my my ANCAS was not created, but basically I have it. It was missing, so I didn't add it. It's part of the bundle that I didn't put my ANCAS in. But you basically get the idea here that with the operator, you can manage your gateways, and these changes are applied dynamically to your folder. So let's now look at a static change. Okay, so as I said, when you make bigger changes like your entire framework, your entire environment, and you basically say, okay, this is such a big change that I want my container gateway to be restarted. So here, for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to add another JDBC connection. So I'm just going to copy this and I put that in my static folder. Okay, I paste it here. And then let me do a watch on the pod. So if I commit that, I pick up my dynamic repository, my static repository. You see the OAuth that I need to commit. I push it. Okay. So it's being picked up. And you will see here the pod. Here in this case, you see a new pod is started. So a new gateway is started, and it basically restarts, the pods based on your rolling updates configuration, it will update the cluster and restart the containers. And I have nothing to do. As again, it's all automated, and basically the operator do bring a lot of automation capability for the management of your cluster. And this is what we really want to achieve, and what our customers want to achieve when they have large environments. They want to have automation for the management of their platform. So let's wait for a few minutes. Any other questions in the meantime that you want me to address? So I see, Ben, you have been, so you see the first pod is being terminated.
While you wait for that, I'm gonna go back to Phil's question. Phil, your question was what happened when I scale gateways, what configuration would the new gateways would have? And that assumes that there was not a config change, so the new gateways would just get the same configuration as the already running gateways. However, with this static and dynamic approach for managing gateways using config as code and the operator, there will be a period of time before all gateways have the same configuration if there is a configuration change. So for example, if there's a configuration change in a static repository, what happens in Kubernetes is the operator detects that and it spins up a new container that is bootstrapped with the new configuration. And when that container becomes available, it terminates one of the existing containers, and it continues with that rolling update process until all containers are on the new configuration. And you've got some control of that through Kubernetes configuration. But nonetheless, it's sort of a rolling update, if you will. That is true.
Exactly how Helm does it today, isn't it?
It's how Helm does it. It's how Kubernetes does it. It's, and it's especially for ephemeral container gateways that aren't backed by a database, right? If you got Layer7 gateways backed by a database, which you could have even for containers in Kubernetes, they're getting their configuration from the database. You could update one gateway, it updates the database. That effectively updates all gateways sharing that database. So it's quicker in that sense. But that doesn't solve for multiple clusters and synchronizing them. There's still this idea that it could take time to get all of your gateways on the same configuration. Now, from a ephemeral container gateway perspective and what we're talking about with the operator with static and dynamic config as code, I just described the static rolling update scenario. There's still a rolling update even with the dynamic scenario, which basically takes the configuration changes and applies them dynamically to your running gateways through the Graph-Man API. It's just quicker, but it's still there because the operator has to call every one of the gateways it's managing, passing every one of those APIs, the configuration change, right? So there's a process of making those calls to all your gateways. And until all the gateways have received that call, some of your gateways will still be running on old config while some are running on new config. I mean, if you absolutely had to control that, you could scale everything down, scale everything up, and everything would be on the same configuration, but it wouldn't be a rolling update, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It just requires you have to think about it if you're changing their front end policy and the back end policy at the same time. They have to match. You have to think about it, but it's the only way you can do it. There is always going to take time.
Right. The only way to do it with no downtime, right? I mean, you could scale down to 0, then scale back up. And there would be no time where you have container gateways on different configuration, but there'd be some time where you don't have gateways, right? So that's the alternative. Sorry, I wanted to go back to that because it was nuanced and I wanted to make sure you were thinking about all those things. Back to you, Christian.
Yeah, no problem. So here, just I basically the static gateway, the static repository basically triggered a gateway restart, and just here you have the new JDBC connection, which I had added into my static repo. So I wanted to make it super simple to show you basically how the two type of repository are being handled by the operator. And I also wanted to use a super simple gateway to start with. So I basically took my sample from the basic gateway that is here. Okay, if you now look into this basic gateway, you have other repositories. So you have the framework repository, which is static, which as we said, it typically in a static repository would have your framework, and this repository requires secrets and keys for connections. Same for the subscription, which is dynamic. So I'm going now to basically just take exactly what is available into the Git. So I'm going to delete my gateway, and I'm going to run the example exactly as is in the get started. So delete gateway SSG. By the way, I don't think I showed you if you do get, because the gateway is a custom resource. So if you do kget gateway, you will see the SSG gateway. So delete gateway SSG. Okay, now to basically start my basic gateway, I need to add the resources that are defined in this folder. So I'm going to basically run this these commands, the apply the base configuration, and that will basically create the required bundles, the secrets that are needed, and then I basically create my file repository. So, and this file repository here, is basically fetching, the configuration from an imploded bundle. So before I showed you an exploded or part of an exploded bundle. So this is a fully exploded bundle when you do a Grafman export from your gateway and you explode the bundle, but you could put that into a single file, and this is basically put your configuration into a single file, and typically it would be kind of a framework configuration that you would put in a static repository that you want to apply. Okay, so now I basically going to also apply my framework. So the framework repository is defined here. So it's pulling the configuration from this Git folder. And again, these are without authentication, but you can access protected folder, and it's documented the credentials. So here you see a lot of configuration, cluster properties, JDBC connection, GMS connection, keys, secrets, and also the bootstrappable framework with APIs that you see here. I'm also going to apply the subscription repository here. And then I'm going to start my basic gateway. So this is the one that is defined in this file, basic gateway, you see here. And obviously you may have watched the controller, which basically is managing all these repositories and the gateway. So if I now do watch, I see that my gateway is running. So it's being started. And after it started, I will just connect through the policy manager to show you all the the configuration that is being applied. So from the repositories. Any question?
Hey, this is Talha from AIM. Just wanted to ask, is there any metrics or monitoring available with Layer 7 operator?
If there are metrics for monitoring the operator?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure I get the question.
I'm asking if any metrics for monitoring is available when Layer 7 operator either accepts the push, performs an update on the gateways.
So the operator is a pod, right? So I would say the standard Kubernetes metrics for pod would apply in terms of monitoring. That's
At this point, we're not providing a Layer 7 productized way of monitoring the operator directly. We would just defer to the way you would monitor anything that's running in Kubernetes. And so that would apply to the operator too.
So you see here that my gateway is started. Okay, and if I connect, okay, get services. Okay, just picking the IP, and if I connect here, replace the IP. Admin 7 thing. And you see, the APIs that are added, the one I had before, it's the same folders, the bootstrapable frameworks, everything that you see here, the cluster-wide properties that are being defined. So all that's, was applied. So this is the example that you have right away into documentation, which is the basic gateway. If you want to go even further, you can. So it's all well documented, and I would say the examples and as I said in the beginning, there has been a great attention put into documentation. So if you want to have extra configuration for your gateway, you have everything defined here in this in the documentation. What is also interesting is as the gateway and the repositories are created with a SDK, with the operator SDK. In the docs folder, you have the auto-generated documentation for the gateway custom resource. So this is documentation that is auto-generated by the SDK. The same for the repository. So looking at both, sometimes makes sense, but the wiki is really well documented. We have also in the examples here, I'm just pointing your attention to the fact that we have here other examples for gateways with open telemetry enablement, both to send the data either to Elastic or to Prometheus. That is certainly the topic for another office hour, but it's also being managed and deployed through operators. So I would say if you are comfortable with the simple examples, you see here the gateway configuration for enabling open telemetry and sending the data to Elastic or to Prometheus. So that's other examples that you may want to go through, and it's all documented in this Git repo. So yeah, that basically concludes the get started with operator presentation I had today and the demo. If you have more questions, we are all ears.
Yeah, I would like to ask, how do you recommend working with a development environment? I saw this policy as code, and I was wondering, if I want to develop something on the development, and I saw that you have repository static and dynamic and all of this, how would you recommend splitting, or I don't know, the result from Graphmen, the export? If I hope that I'm clear.
Yeah, so the first, I would put apart policy as code, because policy as code is something that is going to be available soon. So if you look here, just a side note on policy as code, here I have a policy, for example. When you look into the policy, okay, you see here that the policy is defined as XML. What we are going to do, and Ben can certainly have a few words on that, is basically to use JSON or YAML configuration for policy. So policy as code would be going the extra step and making your policy here visible not as XML, but as easy to manipulate JSON and YAML. As far as your question is how you would do, typically, what we suggest is for dynamic upgrades of your gateway, your folder, our recommendation would be that your folder does map the same structure as you would have as a as a Graphmen exploded folder. Okay, so you see here that my dynamic repo, I just had cluster properties, and here in the tree I had my subfolder where I have my APIs. You see my cluster properties, but if I have JDBC connections, I could put them here as well. So that would be, I would say, the dynamic folder would be for things that often change and do not require a gateway restart. Okay, so say for example, we have customers that create an API once in a while, and we have customers that basically create APIs 10 per day, for example. So when you are basically producing a lot of changes and you don't want your entire cluster to entire cluster to keep rebooting all the time, using a dynamic folder really makes sense. A static folder would be more for underlying framework configuration, which is not changing that often. So when you make a major change, like JDBC connections are all changing because your backends are changing, or your GMS connections, or things that are more environment related, then a static, putting these into a static folder makes sense. And in this case, you could also use, as was shown into one of the examples, the basic example here, you had a repository which was actually HTTP repository mapping, pulling a file repository. You see here we're pulling the bundle from a JSON file through over HTTP. So that would be our recommended approach, I would say.
Christian, I think the easy answer to that was it's going to depend on how you're updating and things like that, right? But I think it's not a one size fits all on how you'd split things. So I think yeah, that was some good ideas. Just one thing I did want to say quickly before we get off, you may have seen the operator in the release notes. It's in a state which we call preview, which is part of our journey to get features out faster to our customers. So it's there, you can play with it. It is supportable. So if you have a requirement to start using this in production, this is maybe what you were talking about. We can actually support this in production. So if you have that requirement, you look at the operator and you think, yeah, I need to start using that. I want to be able to open support tickets and that kind of thing. You can either open a support ticket and ask to be supported, or contact your Broadcom contacts, and we will kick that journey off. So we put a certain number of customers on a limited support list, and we take that through as part of our progressive delivery journey. So if you've seen this, you start playing with it and you want to use it, then please reach out. We're really interested in working closely with people who who are ready to get this into a production or pre-production environment. And if there are no other questions, Christian, I'd like to say thank you. I've been through this. I've done the workshops and gone through that, and I still learned some things. So great session, really well done. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Christian. Good job.
Thank you. And as said, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we are happy to help. And I know the operator topic sometimes may feel daunting, but it's actually super easy to use, and it delivers great value for our customers. So don't hesitate to use it and get started. Thanks a lot, and have a happy Easter.
Great,
Yes,
thank you,
thank you,
Christian.
Christian.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Aaron. Oh, Aaron's disappeared. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. Again, this will be available this afternoon as a recording up on Communities. And with that, we hope to see you next month, and have a good rest of the day and good weekend.
Thank you.